So I wanted to make a video about sexual abuse in objectivist circles. I've been challenging objectivism for about 2 years now. Arguably, this is one of the biggest reasons I challenge objectivism. I was an objectivist for about 10 years. I was in many objectivist circles. I was involved in college, all of it. And while my own life experience started to cause me to leave objectivism, but what made me hate it was ultimately a feeling that I was manipulated and abused by the people who are deep within objectivism. And I think most of the abuse probably has a sexual nature to it. They want to manipulate and exploit people for their own sexual purposes. I was preyed upon by both men and women. I'll give you a example other than my own. I'll give you some of my experiences, and I'll give you the history, because have you heard of objectivist psychotherapy? It's not a thing, is it? Well, actually, it was huge back in the day, and it ended for a reason. So one of the perhaps most shocking examples I can give you of a modern sexual abuse. Now, sexual abuse in modern times is much different than it used to be. It used to be able to be out in the open a lot more than now. Now it's kind of, there's more awareness of it now, but it's still there. They just do it behind the scenes. They yuck about it. In some ways it makes it worse because it's not obvious. So back in, I don't know, maybe 2016 or so, I knew this lady. She was actually the same exact age as me. And she had escaped from dictatorship. Now, I'm going to leave out details because I don't really want to put anyone on the spot, but this did happen. And she found strength in Ayn Rand, as so many people who escape dictatorship do. And so she was an objectivist, and she's very attractive. And I would guess one or two men were interested in her, which is fine. But she had said once that a certain person was doing something to her, I can't remember what, because she kept turning him down. All she did was say it. She didn't say, I want him punished. She didn't say, I want you to disassociate from him. She just said what was happening. And this group of objectivist men got together to totally bury her. They actively said, she said something bad about this guy, and we know this guy, he's a man of reason, whatever. We need to get together and defend him. And ultimately, no objectivist did anything about it. I did in my own way. I talked to some other women about it. I wish I had been stronger about it. But ultimately, no one in the objectivist movement was like, this is really, really bad, and you should stop doing this. People who are more seasoned should be able to do this, and they don't. And this is very strange for a philosophy that proposes to be reason and morality itself, to go off into the bliss in Galt's Gulch, where there's no tyranny and everyone's rational and everything's consensual. And they can't clean this up in their own ranks. Looking back, when it happens, it's like, okay, that happened. But looking back, it seems worse. It just seems really bad. Like, really bad things happen, and most of humanity just kind of goes, oh, that happened. My own experience is that they would kind of hunt me as if I was prey. They would spend years targeting me and flattering me, telling me they enjoyed hearing my ideas and participated in some of the things I would do and stuff like that. And then the manipulation and the abuse starts. Typically, I was always on the hot seat about how I was allowed to be. I had to smile more, be happier, don't be angry. There was always pressure on me about how I was allowed to behave. My involvement with objectivism was mostly through social media, so none of this affected me that much. It's just this feeling that you were manipulated this whole time by people pretending to be your friend, and then the second that you don't give them what they want, or it's made clear that you're just over it, and they just bolt and run. Like, it's just this disgusting feeling. It's just this feeling of, I knew the whole time. I knew the whole time that they were kind of creepy, and it's like I'm kind of a friendly person, and it's this crappy feeling that they took advantage of my friendliness. And so I had to get over that. It took me a little bit just to kind of calm down from that feeling of, I don't know if you want to call it betrayal. I have very much disgust for them. But I was fascinated to learn that there's actually a book called Therapist. It's about how an objectivist psychoanalyst was sexually exploiting his patients. Now, I was involved in objectivism for probably 20 years, off and on, from college until I rejected it when I had rejected it in stages, but I had rejected it by the time I was 40. And I had never heard of this book. Now, isn't that strange? Now, this is a huge thing in their history. So apparently, there's a therapist. There's basically only two at the time that anyone thought was, good enough to spread objectivism. And he was kind of like number two. But the way that he abused them is very much in alignment with how objectivism operates. He appealed to his rationality, his superiority, and his patients were below him. And when they didn't want to do what he wanted to do, such as wrestle nude, he accused them of having psychosis. He accused them of irrationality. Now, this is pretty much my entire issue with objectivism. It claims rationality itself. And it proposes to tell you what to do in all choices you make all day long, that you should use your rationality. Ayn Rand proposes that she's for reason. And so she claims reason itself. But reason typically means you study to come to a conclusion. You might look at the data of how Mars appears at night and put it together to figure out that it's revolving around the sun in an elliptical pattern. You can be a person of reason and not buy into most of objectivism. Most people of reason, in fact, maybe not most, but a lot of them are completely absent-minded. They're so lost in their thoughts, and they walk around and they're not using... Ayn Rand's definition of reason is you use your mind for all decisions you make. And when you claim rationality for yourself and you tie it to a morality, you claim the upper hand. You're better. Everyone else is irrational and immoral. It's a total power play, and it's narcissistic abuse. Now let's take a look at Ayn Rand herself. If you read Nathaniel Branden's My Years with Ayn Rand, she was much older than him, met him when he was 14 years old, entranced him with her intellect, and ended up having a sexual relationship with him. Now, to me, that's sexual abuse. And if you read his book, he says that Atlas Shrugged was her fantasy. She liked the idea of being a woman with a harem of men. And Ayn Rand is also very belittling of women who are attractive or who have large breasts or who are blonde. In my opinion, Ayn Rand's deep motive was manipulating people for her own sexual needs. And, Nathaniel Branden got to take the brunt of that. He was by all accounts, a fairly attractive, accomplished man that she was attracted to. I would encourage you to read his book, and I would contend that her behavior was that of a narcissist, someone with a severe case of narcissistic personality disorder, and objectivists look at all up in arms when you say that. How can you diagnose her? Are we being armchair generals? Most narcissists do not submit themselves for diagnosis, so we can't, formally identify it. That doesn't mean she wasn't. And Ayn Rand herself dished out all sorts of psychoanalysis on all sorts of people. So don't tell me not to analyze her. I would suggest you read his whole book. You can read my website, Ex-Objectivist. I actually don't go into it as much there, but I do talk about how narcissistic abuse operates and how it's very much in alignment with how an objectivist thinks. And in my book, The Moral Bias of Objectivism, I'll break it down a little bit further. I discuss how some of her characters, almost all of them, had narcissistic traits, and how the way she thinks is just like that of a narcissist. Narcissism is when your true self, you've decided, is weak and ugly and stupid, so you put on a false self, a false cell. And that's exactly what objectivism is. Objectivism says your inner emotions are potentially all wrong, they're destructive, they're sadistic, they're bad. You need Ayn Rand's ethics, a way to behave, to be better. And I would say that that's narcissism itself, and that's my main issue with objectivism. Now, some people might say this has nothing to do with objectivism. This is just randomly bad people acting badly, which is the same excuse religion has been given for centuries. So objectivism is a behaviorist philosophy. It proposes to tell you how to act, what is moral, what is immoral. If there is any problem in objectivism, they have the most powerful tool you could ever have under your belt, which is a moral system. They should be able to take care of it, and they don't. And here's the thing, if you go read about abuse, abusers are not scared little lambs, hurt little lambs who need more love. That's the narrative, and that's what abusers want you to think. Abusers feel profoundly morally justified. Now go read Lundy Bancroft's work. Why does he do that is his book. He says every abuser feels that he was entitled to his abuse. They feel that they were doing something good. I would give the example of a parent who spanks their kid. They think they're doing something good. They think that they're inflicting positive discipline on their kid. And of course, many would argue, I would argue that all they're doing is abusing the kid. They're just hurting the kid. But that's the way the abuser thinks. They think the girlfriend was running her mouth or whatever, and they were entitled to do whatever it is they did. Lundy Bancroft says abuse is a twisted, a distorted idea of right and wrong. And guess what? Objectivism proposes an idea of right and wrong. So if you see an objectivist behaving badly, it's very much likely due to their objectivist thinking that directly tells them what is right and what is wrong. So I don't know how more I can impress that upon you, because ultimately I'm trying to talk to abusers themselves, and they're never ever going to concede this. So I'm not talking to them as much as I'm talking to everyone around them. I'm basically trying to warn you of objectivism. Ayn Rand has some good things to say about economics especially, but I'm warning you, the core philosophy, the stuff about morality, that stuff is narcissistic to the core. Ayn Rand was a fiction writer. She was not a seasoned psychologist. She doesn't even pretend to be a psychologist. She does. She tried to fix people around her as if she was wise, but she has no success with it. She was a good fiction writer. She was not a psychologist. She should not be deciding what is the most important thing about human nature, and to develop an all-encompassing ethics that should be with us, as she intends, all waking hours of the day for all decisions we make. And if I can't convince you of all this, let me just be blunt. Objectivist circles are filled with narcissists and psychopaths. If they're still around and they're older than they're 40, or they're not doubting it by the time they're 30, that was what I had to realize, is that these people aren't like me. Deep down, these are very disordered people. So my website is Ex-Objectivist.com. I give a very philosophical analysis of the philosophy itself with exact quotes. And my response from objectivists has always been belittlement, chauvinism, rehashing objectivist talking points. They won't respond to me with reason, despite being beacons of reason, but I have lots of quotes from Ayn Rand to prove my points, a lot of things to consider. It's a new way of thinking. I'm going against a lot of cultural norms about their views of abuse and narcissism and science itself. I'm not just trying to take down objectivism. This is bigger to me than just objectivism. People want to know why I do it? Well, I have my own reasons, okay? So anyway, Ex-Objectivist, YouTube channel is The Ex-Objectivist. Thanks for watching.